So since Betty's here, why don't I go ahead and start? I put the quilt together and I got it off to the quilter and I documented it to
Oh,
share with you
Oh,
guys
good.
what it takes to do that. So I thought you might be interested in the process. So this is finishing up the quilt. So I got it to this point, which is not quite done yet, but I got the design area completed and I put the yellow border around it like we had proposed. And then I tried it on a queen size bed to see what it felt like. Okay. And the thing to think about at this point in the development of a quilt is what's the hang. So here's the edge of the mattress and I wanted to hang about 15 inches. So I had to do that part. And the other thing I wanted to check is where is it at the top of the quilt? Because here's where your chin's going to be. And sometimes people make it completely symmetrical, like they'll put that extra 8 inches at the top as well. But you can see that what that's going to do, it would go over your pillow. But then when you're sleeping under it, either you have to take it off like a bedspread, or you have to fold it down and then you have extra stuff around your chin. So my preference is to keep this relatively short up here, not add very much to this. It's pretty much done at the top, but to go ahead and continue the drop down to about 15-inch drop. Comments about that? Does that sound logical to you or what?
so you're only going to have one border at the top?
Yes, yes, I'm going to keep it fairly simple at the top. I'm not going to add a lot, but down here I want to get to 15 inches of it on the other 3 sides. Okay. So now I'm trying out fabrics, and this is the one I had originally thought that seems to go with things well. I had some of this on, but I was thinking it's a little bit too much pattern. I thought this sort of all over was maybe better. So this is the one I decided to go with. Okay, so now when you, oh, and I should go into presentation mode there, that's better. So adding the long borders is a challenge. So we're gonna need a border that we've got the design area that I just showed you. And we're gonna have to add long borders to both sides and borders at the very ends. I drew that one on there, even though I'm not going to do it, but just showing you the principle. We need a border 88 inches long. From here to here is 88 inches. Or actually from this point to this point is 88 inches. That's the main thing. But the material on the bolt is only 43 inches wide. So how are we going to do that? We could piece it. You could go ahead and have a seam in the middle of each of these sides. Or I like to do it so that you get a continuous piece. And that's an interesting undertaking. So I'm going to show you how I do that. First of all, you take the yard goods. You remember how I prepare the yard goods, selvage to selvage and turn it over. So now this is about 11 inches wide. And it goes on forever, right? And I'm going to take that piece and I'm going to cut the 88-inch width. So I'm cutting it off at 88 inches. And you notice it's longer than my board. My board is 36 inches. I have it doubled. So I only have to cut half of it. So half of 88 is 44, but which is bigger than 36. So what I did was I took another green board and butted it up right at the end of it. And I just continue over until I get to the point that I want. From here to here, by the way, is an inch. So you just keep going inches. It doesn't really matter what number this says, as long as the total length is right. So notice I'm trying to keep each piece a nice rectangle as I go, so I don't have little bits going cockeyed at some point, I'm just working in rectangles and building it up sort of geometrically. So now I have a piece that's off the bolt. So it's 45 inches wide and it's 88 inches long. Now I take it and I unfold it. So now you've got a piece that's pretty much like a sheet. Okay. Right now it's folded up. I'm going to unfold it all the way out. And then I want to cut a piece 90 inches long by now 10 or thereabouts to make my drop. Okay. Do you know how long 90 inches is? So we're talking what, 7 feet? So the 7 feet is what, about the length of a room? Right. So where am I going to lay it out? Good question. So I'm folding again. I fold things down to size. So first of all, I'm going to fold it back over. So now it's only 45 inches wide, which is still a challenge. You can put it on the dining table, but yeah, not too many places you can put something 44 by 45. So I'm going to fold it again. And now it's 22 inches wide by 44. Aha, we're getting down to something more or less manageable. I'll do it one more time just for good luck. Now it's pretty much the same size as the piece we started with. Only now I've got the length of it this way. So if I just slice it, I'm going to get my 90 by 10. Okay. So that's what I do. I've been apartment living most of my life, and you fit big jobs into small spaces and just whittle them down to size. You know what they say? How do you eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? Any guesses? One bite at a time. So you just take big jobs and put them into small spaces. So now that I have this piece, I can slice it off the way I want it.
How many layers was that?
8.
8 layers? Wow.
Yeah, so it takes some heft, and sometimes you have to cut it 2 times to make sure you get all the way through the bottom. But yeah, you can just slice off chunks as you need them. And now I've got 90 inches long by whatever I say here. Okay. So that's going to give you those very long strips. So here it is with this black border and a little brown border. And I added one brown border beyond the yellow up here. Okay.
That's pretty.
I think so.
Nice.
I think it came out great. Kudos to Betty.
Thank you.
So I have one more star. This is one of the ones I made that turned out not to be the same size as Betty's star. So I'll put it on the back. Nobody will know the difference, but it didn't work on the front. Okay, so I have one more star and I have some raw materials that we can play with. And I want to put it back together. We said we wanted to piece the back. And now I have to give you a disclaimer that I rarely piece the backing of my quilts. I've done it 1 or 2 times, but usually I take one big 108-inch wide piece of fabric. They do make such a thing. So it's 108 inches wide. You take 108 inches long and you've got the back of your quilt. So usually I do a 1-piece back, and there are a couple. Hello, Bronwyn. Hey, Bronwyn, we'll let you get connected in, and I'll go back and show her the quilt.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Hi, Bronwyn.
Hi.
Hi.
Sounds like Millicent's connecting too. Great. So hi, Bronwyn.
Wow, what a beautiful quilt Betty made.
Isn't that great?
Thank you.
Oh, it's fabulous.
So I've been sharing with them how I put it together and put the borders on and stuff like that. And now we're about to start working on the back of the quilt. So we're going.
Wow.
So, well, we have to work on the back, and I was just telling them, usually I make the back one piece like we did for your quilt. Just
Right.
take a piece of fabric that's 108 inches wide, or you can take multiple pieces of 44 inches wide fabric, but you can tell already that getting to 90 inches is going to be a challenge. Plus, if you send it out for machine quilting, your backing needs to be 4 inches bigger than your quilt on all sides. So you take the 88 inches wide, for example, and you add 8 inches to get 4 on each side, right? And so 88 plus 8 is 96, and 96 is bigger than twice 45, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, so 45 times 2 is 90. That means you would have to add another 6 inches just to get the width on a backing like that. So I like to work with 108 inch wide fabric, and then you don't have a seam. Because you figure if you're under the quilt, what's next to your body is the back. And I like to try to minimize the number of seams that are going to be in touch with the body underneath the quilt. So anyway, that's my philosophy. But what we're going to do here is piece the backing in order to show off the fabric that was used to make this stack and wax. What was its original form? So we have some raw materials. I have some bits and pieces of this fabric. I don't have a huge piece of it, but I do have several smallish pieces. And then the other fabrics that we used in the colors of the quilt. The primary backing that I chose for this is this teal that looks a little bit like water, that I thought was kind of nice. So that's going to be the primary color on the back. And when we were playing with it, we all said we loved this color, but we didn't know if the buyer was going to love the color. So this is the mock-up I made of what I intend to do with the back. I made these 4 patches that are pretty big. I think this is 8 inches square, thereabouts. And then remember, I had prepared this strip of little bits and pieces of our design fabric that I thought we were going to use on the front. We decided it was too busy on the front. But I thought, well, what the hell, I'll use it on the back. The other thing I did was every one of these is put together slightly differently. So here you have this, and here you have these points pointing at each other, and these are different, trying to show how when you spin this fabric, they all come out different. And you notice this one's a little bit smaller than these are. So we'll have that to deal with when we put it together. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is, where's the mattress? So the mattress is more or less there where I put the red square. And that's the intent of the design. So we have the 15-inch overhang on these 3 sides, and we have less up here under the chin. And don't forget, 4 inches of this is specifically for the quilter. So she needs that margin to get the quilt onto her machine. And so it's not going to be in the finished quilt. So this is really all that would have up under the chin at the top. And that gives you room for, once you put a human body under this quilt, it takes up some of that length. So that is good. All right. So what did I say over here? We had add 4 inches on all sides for the quilter. That's this black line is marking that. And this is marking where the mattress is going to be. So we don't want these edges to be too complicated. We're going to keep that as smooth as possible. This is the machine, one of the styles of machines, but this is a long arm quilting machine, just to show you what the challenges are. So she's going to attach all 3 layers to different rollers on this machine. The backing, this blue is her backing. This is the front of the quilt, and this is the batting that's going to go inside. So all 3 layers of the have to come together, and then this long arm quilting machine has much bigger reach than your regular sewing machine and can reach over this big lump. That's one challenge, and have a field of operation that allows her to do a big pattern. Okay, so that's why it's called a long arm. This is called the throat of your machine. And the throat on a regular sewing machine is about like that. So that shows you what you gain with it. These are expensive machines. They usually start about $15,000. I saw one yesterday for $35,000. And at one point I contemplated buying one. But first of all, it'll take up a 2-car garage. Okay, it has to be 10 feet long in order to do a king size quilt plus mechanism. So it's longer than 10 feet. I have a friend who has one. She has it in a 2-car garage. She took over the entire 2-car garage, much to her husband's dismay, but she makes good money. So he jokes about it. But anyway, and then I said to myself, look, you can send out a lot of quilts for $15,000. So I'd rather pay somebody else to do the work. It's also a workout because you wind up walking from one end to the other as you do this quilt. See, these are the handles, and you are guiding this machine across your quilt, and then you roll it up some more and you do another row, and you roll it up some more and you do another row, walking from side to side. So now we're going to talk about how we're going to put this quilt together. And I'm going to block it. I'm going to basically make it like a paper piecing pattern. So do what I call blocking it. Just run parallel lines through it every time you're going to need to cut something. So first I'm going to block it in columns. And I want also keep in mind that the horizontal lines in the fabric, these run the lengthwise on the bolt. Okay, so we're going to block it, and we'll keep in mind that the horizontal lines in the fabric run lengthwise on the bolt. So the first row or the first column that we're going to do is this guy. And what I would do first is flesh this out to the edges. So I'm making them all pretty much the same width in my column. So this is the critical distance. That frame didn't need to be that big. But anyway, I would just put something on these two sides of this one to make it the same width of the column. Then I would add the pieces between and on the ends to flesh it out. Now I have a whole row. Then I'll do the same with the other row. So we've built it up little bit by little bit. And then all you have to do is add these strips in the middle. So let's take a look at what it would do if we did it as rows instead of columns. So this time I have a lot more lines because I had offset these a little bit. So you have to deal with that offset. And we're not actually going to cut all those places, but those are when you block it, you have to decide where would I need to change. I can't just make one full strip. So where would that have to change? So if I'm going to do this row, I would do the same thing. I'd first make these blocks the proper width. So here I'm adding a piece on the bottom, and here I'm adding a piece on the top. I don't know why I offset it from there. It should have been on this level instead of that. Sorry about that. But anyway, so we're making them consistent sizes so that we can make one big row that's the same size. And then you fill them in. And similarly for the bottom, I would make sure that these are now the width of the row, the height of the row, and then add the whole pieces of background fabric there. So now we have 2 rows. Hi, Fran. So rows or columns? So which one do you think we ought to do? The rows or the columns?
I think you gotta check with the rows, the measurements of the rows.
Okay.
I'd vote for the columns.
You know,
seem like-
go ahead.
It just seemed like
Oops,
less
I went
piecing.
wrong direction. Oops, I can't do that so easily. Well, yeah, you're right that the columns seemed a lot less cluttered. Right? So it seems like a logical choice. I agree with you, but there's one consideration. How are we going to make these whole pieces?
You have to measure.
If the horizontal lines run lengthwise on the bolt, we could make a piece this wide that was continuous. But if we try to make a piece like this continuous, we're going to have to piece it. See what I mean? I can only get 45 inches like that with the design running in this direction. See?
you
So,
have to
but in this one,
material.
I can make a piece like that, just like we did before with the black. We could make a piece like this with the horizontal lines running the lengthwise on the bolt. I can make one single piece like that. So that turned out to be my dominant consideration. We're going to make these rows, and it seems more fussy, but it's actually not too bad. So I'll show you how it turned out. So here's me, first of all, making sure that the height of those pieces are the same as they need to be for the big row. And then I put the piece in the middle. And then, so here I'm measuring what I want to do for the middle. And don't forget that whatever you want to see, you're going to have to add a half inch.
Today, no bingo.
He's tired. He looks.
So I've got these together and I'm going to add
Right,
Did you give
the
him a-
pieces on the end.
that's what he just said.
Here I've got the 2 rows together. The center parts of the 2 rows are together. So here's the one with the yellow, here's the one with the brown. And I overlaid them a little bit so that I could see where this is, because remember this is smaller. So I wanted to center this on top of the other one. And so I had to measure this space because it's different from this space. Okay, so I measured this space and then added a half inch in order to figure out what I needed to cut this piece. So now I have these 2 pieces together. These are the center pieces of our 2 rows.
Thank you, Joyce.
And then now I'm laying them out, making sure I've got them lined up. So you can see this guy is centered over this one. I've added the side pieces. So now I have the 2 long rows. And I decided that at this point I needed to try it on the bed. Because here's what I'm aiming for, right?
Mhm.
And now I put it on the bed. Because I was trying to decide if I wanted the narrower piece here and the big piece up here, like that, or if I wanted the wider piece in the middle and the smaller piece at the top. So I was doing this with a friend and she and I decided that the one on the right is what we would do, have the wider piece in the middle and the smaller piece at the top. So right now this is just rows. So here's the bottom row that's full and the first design row, the middle, the second design row, and the top. Those are just strips that I just laid on the bed. But I'll do it once in a while just as a kind of sanity check. And you notice that it falls farther than the quilt did because we've got that extra 4 inches in here. Okay, so now I have to measure it and assemble those pieces. So what I did, you know, again, don't forget, this is a really long piece. It's like 90 inches long. So here I have the fold here and the 2 ends are here and I'm just measuring it. So in my board ends here at 36 inches. All this is beyond it. All I did was say it hit the 10 mark. Like that means it's what, 11 inches more than 36. So, but it almost doesn't matter because all you need to do is figure out where's this mark, because I want to cut this fabric to be the same. So I'm going to fold it, and here at this mark is where I want to cut it. And it's huge. So just to give you an idea, I took this picture so you can see how it sits on my sewing machine. So the bigger the quilt gets and the more layers you put together, the more of a wrestling match it becomes to manage the bulk of it. Sometimes I'll put a chair or a small table at this end just to keep it off the floor, and so that it doesn't drag on me, because sometimes if it's heavy, it'll try to pull itself away from you and it becomes harder to control it here at the business end of the sewing machine. So managing the bulk is a challenge. Now you know why I don't want to quilt a queen size quilt. So the next thing you have to do is press all the seams flat. So all the seams, this is going to be inside next to the batting, but as many of these little extra hairs and stuff as you can get off. And you can see I used my trimmer here. This is a like a nipper, but it has curved edges so that it's almost impossible to cut the fabric. As a matter of fact, the blades are not really up to cutting the fabric, but it's great for nipping little bits of thread. So I press them all. See, here's the seam. What I'm trying to do is debulk them. You don't want big little hills for the quilter to have to go across. You don't want to foul up the work that she's going to do. And you want to make sure that you don't have colored threads like that, either making lumps or just look where you can see through them. So then I drove down to Rhode Island to a place called Ryco Trim in Lincoln, Rhode Island. And I love this place. It is huge. And they're traditionally a ribbon and trim factory that's been there since the 19th century. And it's in an old mill building that was built in something like 1876. Okay, so this will give you just an overview of the kinds of trim they do. If you've ever seen a trim display like this anywhere, I would love to hear about it because I had never seen this much variety. That's all trim, laces, ribbons, other kinds of upholstery trim. It's amazing. So, but that's just the trim part. And then what they've done in the last 10 or 20 years is to build up, oh, there's more trim, sorry, is to build up their quilting stuff. So it's just an awe-inspiring quilters heaven, and there are a number of quilt guilds in the area that display their quilts from the rafters like this. So you just walk around and say, ooh, I could do that. See, look at all these beautiful quilts. Not to mention the wonderful choices of fabric that are beneath them. So it is a quilter's heaven. It's kind of hard for me to get out of this place for under $100, but I did it this time. I only bought about 6 pieces of fat quarters that I wanted for a project. Okay, so and there you can see some Janet
The
See this
star.
guy up here. So these joined pieces made into stars. And that's what Janet would like to work on. Okay, so this is the business that I came for. I brought our quilt down here for somebody to work on a machine like this to quilt it. And what they have up here on the wall are the designs that they could use when they do the quilting. So what design should we use for our quilt? Well, let's look at some of these choices. And picture them on top of those piece stars. And you can see that something like this is much too cluttered. It's going to fight the design. This also is much too cluttered. It's going to fight the design. So in here, you got too many points. And it's not in the right mode for what we're doing. This one's not in the mode of what we're doing, but something more open, more loopy, rather than points is the way I would go with it. So here I got it down to 2. This is one of the ones that I thought would work. Loops and swirls or popcorn. And so I consulted with the lady in the store and we picked popcorn to go on top of it.
That's nice.
Yeah. So here you can see they've made it very high contrast on purpose so that you can see the design. But on the quilt, we don't really want it to be that high contrast. So the other choice that we had to make was what color of thread. So here she's helping me choose colors of thread. And we laid out different ones on top. And you can see the path of the thread on top of this color. And we tried out, like here's the yellow thread on top of this color. What's going to be the most attractive, because it's going to go across the design of the fabric and across the design of the stars, but it's also going to cross a lot of this open space, what they call negative space. So it's not a design part, it's just background stuff, but you will see the quilting more vividly on top of those negative spaces. And this place allows me to have one fabric, one thread color for the top and a different thread color on the bottom. Not every quilter will do that for you, but just so you know, but this place will. So what I wound up choosing, and there you can see the gray thread. We debated, should we use the gray or should we use the black? So we played with that a little bit, just laid the thread out and said, what do we like? And we wound up with a black thread for the front. So it'd be black thread on top of the design area and also on top of the negative space. And on the back, we're going to use this green. That's right. And so it will travel across these areas and across these areas. So it'll be more subtle. And
Yeah, I would have said black on the top.
yeah,
I wouldn't have added more color.
right. So it's black on
choice.
the top and green on this green on the back. Okay. And then we had to choose batting. And I chose this one, which is the 100% cotton. And it's a king size because what she's dealing with here, the piece as it stands now, is bigger than the pre-cut queen size. So I had to,
Joyce?
yeah.
If you only had one choice of thread, would you have chosen the black for both top and bottom, or what would you have done then?
I think the black on the front is more important than worrying too much about the back. So yes, if I had to go with one, I would have chosen that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Feel free to disagree. This is all artistic choices and your guess is as good as mine, but just to show you, they have pre-cut pieces that are 108 inches square. So it's more or less like a king size sheet. But if you wanted it back with no fuss, no bother, You just buy one of these and you have a back. Okay. So there's a difference between piecing a back and doing one plain piece. So, and this is usually my vote, is to do the back as one piece. So you can see they have a lot of different choices. They even have some batiks up here that make very nice backs. Here's more of a colonial design. There's another batik. So lots of different choices for the back. You can even have the American flag on the back if you want. Yeah.
Joyce, what's the pricing if you went with a piece that was that size versus going to the store and buying how many yards for a back?
Well, you have to remember, we said it was more than 45 plus 45.
Right, yes.
Still it's not enough. So you're going to have three lengths, the length of your quilt. The length of your quilt, 108 inches, is 3 yards. So you would need 9 yards of ordinary fabric, usually at about $11 a yard.
Okay.
Okay, so that's $100. These are usually more like 60, 70, something like that.
Okay. Just curious, not that I'm gonna run out and make, a queen size quilt, but it's good to know.
Yeah, I just wanted you all to know what's available, because my father used to say about hardware stores that 90% of home maintenance is about knowing what's available. Sometimes you just browse a hardware store to see what's available. And similarly, sometimes you just need to browse a fabric store in order to see the tools or the selections that are available just for kits. And here I want to show you a little bit more about how these things work. These two ladies are both working at long arm quilting machines. Okay, they're a little bit different in style. She's working on a pantograph. I'll show you that in a minute. But here's your take-up roller, which you notice is under the throat of the machine. That's one of the reasons why it has to have such a long arm. And all three pieces of their quilt are rolled onto here. You can see it better on this side. The backing of the quilt is on this roller. The top of the quilt is on this roller. Or here you can see it clearly. The top of the quilt is on this roller. Here is your batting sort of hanging loose. And she's putting all three layers together, and then it gets taken up. As it's finished, it gets taken up onto this take-up roller. Okay. So it's a big deal. And you can see how huge these machines are. They're 10, 12 feet long. I used to have not a really good one, but I had a frame that I could use a lower cost machine on. It took up the entire room. And I only used it, a couple of times a year when I had a quilt at this point. And I finally decided I wanted the space more than I wanted the machine. So I wound up giving my frame away. So now we're going to wait 3 weeks while some industrious lady works on a big machine like this to put our quilt together. And then I'll get it back, and it'll still need to be trimmed and bound, but it'll be almost ready to go. So I gave Julie a forecast and told her she would have it by the beginning of December. This is a pantograph, just to show you how this is it. This is the design we chose. So our quilter will have a plate like that, a pantograph, and she'll use it as she works, following this design along. So she's steering it back and forth as she goes through and walking from one end of the quilt to the other. Any other questions about that?
I think it's lovely.
Good.
It's beautiful.
I'm excited to see it finished. It's going to be wonderful. I thought I would put a hanging sleeve on top of it and ask Julie to hang it in the senior center. And then we can take a really good picture of it, because one of the challenges with a quilt like this is taking a picture of it.
Michael says they're putting new rugs down in the coffee area.
Good.
So,
They
well,
have
Joyce, when they hang it at the senior center, would I be able to go in quickly to take pictures, or would that be allowed?
Sure, and I'm going to take pictures too, so I can be sure, I'll be absolutely sure to make sure that you have some.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, we should take pictures with you in it.
Definitely.
I should write my story.
Yes, please do, please do. That would be great, and Julie would love to have that for the newsletter. I think it's a gorgeous quilt, and I think there'll be a lot of interest in it.
It is.